Marvellous. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to take you through just a little bit of research which we've done over the past couple of years, and then give you some insights into what the IAB, but more importantly, what the wider industry is doing to try and address it. Because we hear a lot about how big a problem it is, but not really an awful lot on how to address it. And clearly, as you'll see just from a few of the factor figures which I'll show, there's a variety of reasons why people block. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And what I'm not going to give you is a silver bullet which will solve the problem, but rather it's incremental steps that we need to take as an industry. So many of you may have already seen these figures. We've said this a couple of months ago now, and it's the 5th round of research which we've done, benchmarking and looking at how many people block ads. That's what this slide clearly shows. And the demographics, but actually looking into the motivations also about why people block, and more importantly, what the chances of getting them back are. So we've seen a slight stagnation based on running this research. It is claimed behavior, so it's not measured. It's actually asking people, do you block ads? So we're relying upon them actually then accurately describing the fact that they do block ads, and we'll see an interesting couple of figures in a moment actually tapping into a little bit more detail on that. Heavy skew, as Martin said earlier on, towards males, which we see about roughly about 2 to 1. There's more of a prevalence, of course, of 18 to 24s, but it'd be disingenuous to suggest that actually that nobody beyond the age of 24 doesn't block. They do block, and actually it's pretty consistent amongst all the age groups here. And actually there's no difference in terms of social background, so it's broad. But what we've seen compared to the last time we ran this research is a flattening. We're not confident enough to say that it is flattening off. We wouldn't be as ridiculous to suggest that. But it was about 21.5%, 21.7% the last time we ran this research earlier in the year, and it's now at 21.2%. So there might be some leveling off. We know that it's not going to just continue to rise and get to 100%. There will be some leveling off, of course. And we'll see whether or not in the next few months when we rerun this research, whether or not this proves to be true. During the course of this research, we actually asked people in this last round to actually identify the ad blocker. We know that AdBlock Plus are the most prominent. They're on the far left-hand side, so it's no surprise that 50% of people say they're actually choosing ad blocking, they choose AdBlock Plus. 20% choosing other ad blockers, Purify and other mobile blockers. But interestingly, 20% choosing their virus software, antivirus software. So actually under the illusion that their antivirus software is actually providing them with ad blocking. And that's no real surprise on the conflating the two, really, because a lot of ad blockers have gone out with the mantle of actually saying protect your computer, and actually use our software to do so because it protects against malware. So it's about a security issue. It's not the only issue. Many people cite privacy. The largest chunk actually cites interruption as being the biggest factor for using an ad blocker. But we do know that security is a big factor. So that those people believing that they're using ad blockers are in fact using antivirus software. And we just threw a few non-existent ad blockers into the pool there just to see whether or not people would select it, and indeed they did. 4% selected that. So if you make an assumption, it would be an assumption, that those 4% of people don't use an ad blocker, so that is an assumption, and those 20% of people are using an antivirus software, or say they're using antivirus software and they believe that that's their blocker. If you assume that all of those don't use any other ad blocker, then actually it takes that number from 21% down to about 16%. And I think we'll see from PageFair at the moment, that roughly tallies with what PageFair are seeing as well. So if you just ask the question, do you block ads, you get a much higher figure. And what we haven't shown today, just because we haven't got time, is when you ask people, do you use ad blocking software, have you ever used it? It was about 30%, and it stayed fairly static at about 30%. You then start saying, do you currently use it? And about 3/4 of those people then say, yes, I currently use it. You then say, actually, just checking on what you use, you go into a bit more detail, and actually, about 1/4 of those, again, aren't using ad blocking. They're using other tools which they think block ads, but don't. We then asked these 2,000 people and said, does it, knowing, because we tested their knowledge on whether or not they knew that actually by blocking ads, you were taking away revenue sources from publishers. About 55% of people made a direct link and said, yes, I realize by blocking ads, I may be denying revenue to the service which I'm using. We then explained to everyone, regardless of whether or not they understood or not, if this is the case, if by blocking ads you took away revenue from publishers, would it make a difference in terms of changing your behavior? Are you going to change what you do going forward? And 2/3 of people said no. And that's not really a surprise because the status quo is they can access almost all all content and all services using an ad blocker. There are some which deny services, very few though. So for a lot of people, they're not motivated to change their behavior. But 1 in 5 roughly are. And then there's a kind of quirky, or that's a smaller number here, of less than 10% of people who just want to sock it to the man and say, yep, I'm going to do it even more because I think actually they're crying wolf. But it's quite a small percentage, but it is still statistically significant. But again, it's in the context that they can access content and services for free at the moment without any consequence on the majority of it. But if you actually asked them and said, if you had to make a choice between having access to content for free or having to pay for it, so free and have advertising, or pay for it, 3/4 still would prefer to have it for free and would access that as well. So what we're seeing essentially is this is a choice economy. If they've got a choice, there's no consequence for them actually blocking ads. So there is light at the end of the tunnel saying actually if you do present them with a choice, they are likely to come back. But what we'd suggest, as we'll come on to in a moment, is you don't just return them to the old experience because they've checked out of that by using ad blocking software for a variety of reasons. But if you just try and return them back to the same ads, same formats, the same experience, they may be disengaged. They're still not worth anything as a user, kind of cost per user. You're still not going to get anything from them as a publisher. So what are we doing about it? Briefly in the last 5 minutes. We talked about lean ads last year, that kind of idea, that initiative, but we need to change advertising. So we need to make it light. We need to get rid of the number of data calls, reduce those significantly. We need to encrypt to try and reduce the risk of malvertising. It doesn't completely eradicate it, but if you can encrypt as much as possible, it reduces the risk. Make sure that any advertising that's retargeted has ad choices on the creative as well, so people can actually manage their cookies for retargeting. And then the most prevalent piece, which is the N, which is the non-intrusive side. So trying to create advertising which is engaging and not intrusive. And that level of intrusiveness depends on the person, it depends on the experience, and Google are going to talk a little bit later about, I think, some of their insights and research which they've got, which shows actually what formats work, what experiences work, and what ones are more appealing to people and which are less appealing to people. What we're going to try and do before Christmas is bring out a mechanism by which all of you, for those people that use formats which aren't IAB formats but are bespoke formats, a way of trying to understand how consumer-friendly your ads are based on lean criteria. Here's 6 initial criteria which are being built into this mechanism. There'll be more added to it. And we'll see a series of tools for mobile, web, mobile in-app, and desktop, which allow you to ascertain whether or not the formats you use are consumer-friendly based on a huge amount of insight, research, industry findings, claim research that we have, detailed consumer insights as well and consumer research as well, and basic just industry opinion in terms of forming what we think is going to be a sustainable ecosystem which delivers a good ad experience, allows publishers to monetize, but takes care and actually understands what consumers are willing to accept and what they're not. So this will come out hopefully by the end of this year, if not beginning of next year. So these tools to allow you to determine what is compliant and what isn't. In the meantime, we've overhauled the ad formats, which the IAB has been synonymous with. To date, there's been 33 different formats, and part of the challenge has been, for those people who want to kind of get into advertising and digital advertising, it's quite complex when compared to other media. Part of the challenge has been the number of ad units, the number of ad experiences is too vast. So part of the motivation for this change is to reduce the number of formats, currently from 33 to 12. This is essentially a draft copy of what we believe should be the new ad portfolio. So these are new scale ads, which the IAB is recommending. We haven't done it in isolation. We worked with a variety of different parties there, very small logos, I know, but publishers, agencies, and ad tech. Lots of creative agencies. You've got Grey, RGA, and others actually included in there. So the creative community have been engaged on this. And there are a number of changes which are afoot. The biggest of which is the idea of moving away from fixed pixel sizes to flexible ad sizes. So think responsive design ads. So depending on what screen you look at, the same ad will render accordingly, but the dimensions will be the same. And we're going to move away from fixed pixel ads to ratio ads. So think 1:1, 2:1 ads, keeping it really simple. So you no longer have to talk about fixed ads based on the screen size. You just talk about a ratio ad, and it renders accordingly on every single screen. So that's the biggest change. It's going to mean lots of recoding. We're working currently with DoubleClick, with Atlas, with many other ad servers to try and make the integration for you as easy as possible. This is in consultations, as I said. We are looking for feedback from you and others until 28th of November, with a view to publishing this early next year. So we've been working with Richard and the guys at the AEP to try and understand what your needs are so we can feed that in, so we can get a global view from publishers, agencies, and brands alike. We are definitely open with a listening ear here. We want to hear your feedback. This isn't predetermined, and there are already some changes afoot based on your feedback to date so far. A couple of the big changes before we move on very quickly, because I'm almost out of time, about 1 minute left. Things that are going away at the moment, so this is in draft. Pop-up ads, so any form of ads which overlay content without permission and a user initiation. Forced countdown, because we know that appears, certainly from a consumer point of view, to be very, very badly received. So essentially you're doing a countdown and then it disappears, but it's content which overlays, an ad that overlays, counts down, and then disappears. Consumers don't like that at all. And any form of kind of auto-expand, we're saying that should go away as well. This is probably most controversial, is video, autoplay video. So we're not talking about in-stream, we're talking about out-stream formats, anything that sits outside of an in-stream sort of format. So think Teads type formats, we're talking about ads that just appear in display spots. We're trying to say that autoplay should go away unless under specific circumstances. So it should be user-initiated. It should be a limited file size. Ideally looking at 15 seconds, which I know is going to be quite controversial. That's recommended, because I know a lot of ads are repurposed from 30-second TV ads. And trying to limit the file size and saying it should be user-initiated. No, should always have controls, should have mute, should be automatically muted anyway, but should be mute controls, play, pause controls, always. But it does allow provision for autoplay under specific circumstances of saying actually that if you're tethered to a Wi-Fi, that auto expand is okay, provided you offer those controls of play and pause, that you don't start showing the ad until 50% of the ad's in view, so it doesn't just autoplay somewhere on the page rather, and that there's a way for you to close the ad straight away that's very easy, and its prominence of the close button is very, very clear. So there are specific allowances for autoplay video, but I know for some people that's going to mean a fundamental change to their business models. So we do want your feedback on this. As I said, it is draft at the moment. And then very quickly, in the last 30 seconds, the other big initiative which many of you would have heard of is the Coalition for Better Ads. This is a global coalition. The Lean initiative, which we sort of talked about a year or so ago, will go into this coalition. And think of this coalition as the decision-making body for changing standards around advertising. We're going to feed Lean into that. We're going to feed all our research into that. We're giving essentially a huge amount of technical support via our tech lab to this initiative. But this will be the front-facing body which will determine how advertising, digital advertising should change and adapt based on the consumer needs to improve the consumer experience. You'll see across the top there, lots of buy side there. There'll be others joining the group soon as well. Google, Facebook, Teads, Washington Post, and News Corp from a kind of publishing point of view. There'll be others to come and join the party, and a variety of different trade bodies here as well. So this coalition essentially will govern and look at that, and look at those new standards. There are 4 groups which will determine the minutiae of it. The Standards and Research Committee is the one that's kicked off so far. The others will come into the new year because, of course, you need something fundamental to talk about before you start talking about PR and education. The Standards and Research Committee is the most important. That's the meat and bones. And that's going to talk about what ads are, essentially the standards around advertising, what is good, what's bad, and trying to make sure that when it comes to buying, the buyers actually bake this into their DNA. So it isn't just an optional nice to have, that actually if they make it part of their buying mandate and they put value on non-intrusive advertising, then as publishers, you can expect to see retention in terms of revenues and investment in that rather than a declination in CPMs and people just saying, well, actually it's less interruptive, so I'm willing to pay less. So we want that to be baked into that. The IAB is one of many founders in this as well, but this is not just an IAB initiative, this is an independent initiative. And finally, and I'll leave you on as well, is that there is a cost to join this group. So if you really passionately want to join and be part of this group, you can. It is independently funded and run by a Washington law firm of all people, but it's done so to be independent, to have independent governance, and this law firm has actually helped found the DAA and other initiatives which have become global initiatives, so they're a trusted source. But you can join that. If you want to find me afterwards, I can give you the details and put you in contact with the law firm, with the adjudicators of this group as well. But know that your needs are being represented on that group by the variety of trade bodies representing publishers. But as I said, if you do want to have a seat at the top table, we'll actually investigate how you can join, then come and find me afterwards. Thank you.